Good morning, everybody. We have a busy agenda this morning, so we're going to go ahead and get the meeting started. And we will begin with calling the roll. Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Good morning, members. If you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, we have a quorum with 10 members present and 5 members absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We do. At the moment, we have 3. Miguel Aguirre, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Good morning. My name is Miguel Aguirre. I'm the managing partner for Grand Central West. We own the McDonald's trolley station in San Isidro. And I'm here to continue advocating to this board and to MTS for the issuance of a request for proposals to manage private transportation on public property. As you know, that's the world's busiest border crossing. I've been submitting strategic communications to this board, outlining the history and including last summer a meeting with security, public and private members of MTS, the district attorney, San Diego Police, and there is very broad consensus that we need to improve the conditions for the traveling public there in San Isidro. In January, I began coming regularly to these meetings because of the rain and cold that the traveling public is subjected to when they cross the border, and in recent weeks, the heat. And we have the undue burden being caused on the traveling public, the problem with the Wildcat, the public safety issues, and our building that's being used as a de facto bus station and originally envisioned as the San Isidro bus station. And that's what you'll continue hearing in the months to come, is that we need to restore what Caltrans dubbed back in 2003 as the Intermodal Hamburger Transportation Center. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I look forward to meeting with any of the board members in San Isidro. Thank you.
Peter Cicci, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board. My name is Peter Cicci. I'm representing the United Taxi Workers of San Diego. On February 27th, our Taxi Advisory Committee got a presentation from the airport about increasing fees there, including drop-off fees for all commercial transportation people who drop off people at the airport. And they had a long presentation, but I just want to key on 3 points. One is they said they wanted to provide things that were more equitable. But for taxis, we have to display our fees. And currently we have a pickup fee, and we display that for the passenger. And if there's a drop-off fee, we have to show that for the passenger also. Rideshare drivers don't have to. Uber and Lyft can pick up all the tab for the fees they have. And when someone goes to a rideshare driver, they have no idea that they're paying any extra. And so this new ordinance or this new regulation by the airport would have just increased the public perception that taxis cost more than ride shares and are somehow not equitable in fees. Second of all, they talk about a market, the more equitable markets. Markets are just opportunities to make money. That's what markets are in the business world. So I understand it's an opportunity to make money, but in this case, they're making money off some of the smallest businesses in San Diego. And we don't think that's equitable. Third of all, only 60% of taxi drivers have airport permits, but they're required to take passengers wherever they want to go. So this creates a conundrum for MTS, because you have a requirement that taxi driver would have to take the person to the airport. But if that taxi driver doesn't do business at the airport and doesn't have a permit, they wouldn't be allowed there. There's some workarounds, but we don't think the airport took enough time to consider you and your ordinances and us, the taxi industry, that's a public service, when they did this and we asked.
Your time has expired. Alex Wong, if you can please unmute yourself.
Oh, yes. Good morning, everyone. I would like to say that if MTS has to cut service, please cut or eliminate the two Rapid Express 280 and 290 and preserve 245 service as much as possible. I say this as a Rancho Bernardo resident who almost always takes the 245 instead of the 290 to get downtown. The 290 may be faster than the 245, but that's negated by the fact that the 290 comes only every 30 minutes, while the 245 comes every 15 minutes. So I prefer the 245 because it means less waiting, and waiting is the worst part of my trip. Preserve all days 15-minute frequency on the 245. The 245 alone has over 8 times as many passengers as the 280, 290, and 110 combined. The 245 has lower subsidies per passenger than the 280, 290, or 110. 245 serves the most low-income riders. 245 one-way fares are $2.50, while the 280 and 290 Rapid Express fares are $5. For the sake of riders and for equity, preserve 245, even if you have to eliminate 280 and 290.
That concludes public comments. Chair.
Thank you, Clerk. Let's move to our consent items. The consent agenda includes items 3 through 15. Clerk, is there any public comment on the consent items?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent items?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion from Director Hall. And we have a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Stepp. Any discussion on the consent items? Seeing none, Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 12 members voting yes.
Thank you. Item 16 is the fiscal year 2026 operating budget mid-year amendment, and Gordon Meyer is going to provide the presentation.
Good morning, Gordon Meyer, Manager of Financial Planning. This morning I'm going to present the FY26 operating budget amendment. So we'll go through the different categories of our overall operating budget. So the first we'll look at is operating revenues, and our primary operating revenue is passenger revenue. So our passenger revenue forecast is made up of both ridership and our average fare assumptions. So on the ridership side, we originally budgeted 86.2 million passengers at the beginning of FY26. That's the green line in the chart to the right. That target represented 6.5% growth over last year's actual ridership. However, so far through December this year, we're actually trailing last year's ridership by 1.3% on average. So you can see the solid blue line in the chart is our actual ridership, and you can see it's hovering slightly below the purple line in the beginning of the year, which is last year's ridership, and well below that green line, which was our original budget. So we look at the trends by operator, and then we do a forecast by operator for the remainder of the year, and then we consolidate that all into a one passenger ridership figure. So we're now projecting 80.8 million passengers for FY26. That's a 5.4 million passenger decrease, or 6.2% from the original budget. So looking at it from an annual total, we're now forecasting a very slight reduction of about 0.1% from last year's ridership, or essentially flat ridership growth. The other component of our passenger revenue forecast is average fare. So the original budget assumed $1.04. That target represented 7.6% growth over last year's actual average fare. And the reason we built in that much growth was because we had the changes to the fare enforcement policy that started last February. So far, we haven't generated 7.6% growth, but we're trailing about 6.1% year over year growth. So we are, for the remainder of the year, expecting that year over year growth to shrink starting in February, because we don't have that external change to a fare policy that's expected to drive year over year growth. So we're now projecting about $1 for average fare in the new forecast. So looking at it from an annual perspective, we're looking at 3.9% year-over-year growth, which is well short of that 7.6% target that was in the original budget. Overall passenger revenue, so that's a combination of ridership and average fare. So we had originally budgeted 89.2 million. That was a 14.5% growth target. And so far through December and the reports that have been going to the board, we've reported that we were 4.1 million unfavorable, or 9.3% through December. Although we are significantly unfavorable to budget, we are still seeing year-over-year growth of 4.7%. However, that's well short of the 14.5% target. And then we also expect that year-over-year growth to tighten up beginning in February. So overall, we are forecasting 80.8 million for passenger revenue now, which is a decrease of 8.4 million, or 9.4% from the original budget. So on an annual basis, we're projecting 3.8% year-over-year growth in passenger revenue. Next category is other operating revenue. So you can see how the different categories are changing in the table to the right. The two that are significantly changing are real estate related revenue. So we are increasing our forecast for land management lease revenue. In total, those are expected to increase by 597,000, or 14%. The major change is interest revenue. We are bumping up our annual rate assumption from 3.1 to 3.7%. The Fed just announced yesterday that they're keeping the Fed rate steady again. So we think this is a reliable number. And then we are also increasing our average cash balance assumption based on the movements that we've seen in the first half of the year. So interest revenue is increasing by 1.1 million, or over 16%. So these other operating revenues in total are projected to increase by 1.6 million, or 5% from the original budget. So the next category within our operating budget is subsidy revenue. And one of our major categories here is sales tax. And we have two primary sales taxes. The first we'll look at is Transnet. So Transnet is a sales tax, and we receive the revenue as it's generated on a monthly basis from Sandag. We build our budgets based on a forecast that they do in the beginning of the fiscal year. So the original budget was based on Sandag's forecast of 422 million for the region. Based on that figure and sharing with the other agencies, the MTS share was projected at 40.3 million. Good news here is that cash receipts so far have exceeded the original forecast. And so Sandag provided an updated forecast this January. And so the regional target is being increased to 436 million. That's an increase of 3.4%. So pretty significant impact on the sales tax side. For MTS, the projected share for the formula Transnet is now 42 million. That's an increase of 1.6 million over the original budget. We also receive a direct reimbursement of Transnet from Sandag for operating our BRT and Midcoast services, and we're increasing that forecast by 208,000, and that's just based on the projected expenses net of revenue for those services. Next, we have Transportation Development Act, or TDA. So this is a little different from Transnet in that where Transnet is received as the cash receipts are generated, TDA, we file a claim in the beginning of the year based on Sandag's forecast at that time. And then if cash receipts exceed the claim amount, then that excess revenue goes into a reserve at the county and is available for future fiscal years. If the cash receipts trail that original claim amount, then we're able to draw from the county reserve to make sure that we receive that whole claim amount. So here, as in with Transnet, we're also seeing an increase in the forecast from Sandag. So the original forecast was 195 million. That's being increased to 206 million. So that's a 5.8% increase, so very significant. Avenue is the third-party contractor that does their own independent forecast for Sandag. They're forecasting 209 million. So even higher growth. We are building our budget based on Sandag's more conservative growth factor. And based on that, we are projecting 134 million for MTS. 107 million of that is in the operating budget. All of the increase from this revised forecast is going into the operating budget, and then we're leaving the capital budget unchanged. So what that means for us in this year's budget is a 6.2 million increase in TDA. Next, we have state transit assistance. So this is the state sales tax on diesel fuel. It's a formula fund that gets distributed both on population and agency revenue. We built the original budget based on the state controller's January 2025 projection. And in total, we were expected to receive 33.5 million. Typically 11.3 million of that goes to the operating budget, and then anything above that goes to the capital budget. So that overall total is being projected to decrease by 2 million down to 31.5. We're putting that entire decrease of 2 million in the operating budget so that we can leave the capital piece unchanged. Last slide on subsidy. So SB 125 funding. So this is the 4 billion in one-time state funding. So that's distributed through the TIRCP program. It's a transit and intercity rail capital program. So that historically is a competitive grant program that awards funding for major capital projects. It was temporarily allocated to transit agencies based on a formula, and you could also use it for operations through SB 125 as well, which was new. We're expected to receive 237 million over multiple fiscal years. We've received over half of that so far. This funding is particularly important for us, especially as we go forward over the next few years, because it is what we're using to balance our operating deficits. You can see the different activities that are funded in the operating budget and how it's changing in the amendments. The top three, the security, Iris Rapid, Route 910, are decreasing. That's based on the forecasted expenses for those services. And then the trolley reimbursements going up a little because we're expecting expenses to go up. But the main takeaway here is that structural deficit balancing figures. We originally planned on using 10.2 million in SB 125 to balance this year's operating budget. However, we had more available in our operating deficit reserve due to favorable budget results last year. And so we're using that funding first. And so it reduced the amount of SB 125 funding that we need to balance this year's operating budget. So we will stretch that funding out a little longer. And so overall, the SB 125 funding is coming down by 7.4 million versus the original budget. So here you can see all the revenues summarized. So our total operating revenues are decreasing by 6.8 million. That's led by the decrease in passenger revenue. And then on the subsidy side, the kind of most important item is that we're really seen a large increase in the sales tax. So the TDA and the Transnet, which is offsetting our decrease that we're seeing in passenger revenue currently. And then the SB 125 is decreasing by 7 million, but that's being offset by that second to the bottom line, where we're using about 6 million more in reserves because we had that extra funding available from last year's carryover. So in total, revenues are projected at 471 million, a decrease of about 2 million from the original budget. Moving on to expenses. So before we look at the different categories, I want to give a brief overview of the process. So we did meet with all the departments. That's our typical process, but we review their proposed spending, ask questions. But a little different this year is that we did ask staff in the beginning to identify and reflect any belt tightening opportunities in their spending requests. We also asked them to take a look at any open positions in their departments and see if they could remain unfilled or if we could freeze those positions. We also asked that for any large dollar requests that it's strictly state of good repair necessities, no nice to haves. The planning department has also been looking for minor service efficiencies in our service levels. So those were reflected in the January service change. And then lastly, we did ask for special focus on the anticipated timing of expenses. So sometimes we'll budget for a large dollar project. Some of it will get done this year, some of it next year, and then we end up with larger variances from year to year. So we're really trying to avoid that. And so the coming slides do reflect those efforts. So first category, personnel. So personnel is wages and fringe. So on the wage side, administration wages are decreasing by 421,000, led by the decrease in the forecasted security wages. We're not fully staffed in that department yet, and so we are reflecting that. We also had one staff attorney position that was frozen. It's been open since the very beginning of the fiscal year, so we see some savings there as well. The big change here is a reduction in the projected wages for bus operations, specifically operators, and we're decreasing that forecast by 1.8 million. It's primarily due to a reduction in overtime hours. We've been hovering around 500 operators, which is our best staffing levels in recent history, and so that's really put downward pressure on the overtime costs, which is being reflected here. We also did have some minor service reductions in the January service change that's also reflected here. In terms of position changes, so as an attachment to the agenda item is the position tables. And so we are reflecting the freezing of 20 bus operator positions. So that is not layoffs, it's open positions that we do not plan to fill given these current scheduled service levels. And so that's reflected in the position table. On the trolley side, wages are increasing 64,000. So fairly it's insignificant in terms of dollar change. However, we did identify 9 positions that are being frozen, specifically a revenue maintainer. That department said that they can get by with 1 position left unfilled. 2 collector processors, we're no longer collecting fare revenue on the weekend, and so we don't need to fill those 2 open positions either. And then 6 train operator positions. So we had added these positions last year in order to accommodate potential 7.5-minute headways on the entire blue line. Because the service levels are frozen at January 2025 levels, we do not anticipate needing those additional operators at this time. And then within the changes, there is a request from the transportation department to shift 2 part-time flaggers to 2 full-time positions. And so that is a net +1 FTE. So in total, the position tables are reflecting 30 frozen positions and then 1 increase of an FTE with the construction safety flag persons for a net reduction of 29 budgeted FTEs. So in total, wages are projected to decrease 2.4 million or almost 2% in this amendment. Next, within personnel, we have fringe. So the 2 major changes are healthcare and then that last category of other. On the healthcare side, we're reducing the forecast by 1.2 million, and that is due to an increase in the employee share of costs, which are increasing by 1.1 million. That is determined by the current collective bargaining agreements as well as the actual premiums that went into effect in January. And on the last category is other, which is decreasing by 880,000. So that's actually an increase in cost recovery for construction safety flag person wages, which is a negative expense because anytime those wages are incurred in the operating budget, but most of the work is done on capital projects. So the operating budget gets credited anytime those hours are used for the capital. And we have a lot of major capital projects, including the Orange Line improvement. So we're seeing a dramatic increase in cost recovery. Overall, fringe costs are decreasing by 1.7 million versus the original budget. Next, we have outside services. So the 2 categories that are changing the most here are repair and maintenance and other outside services. So on the repair and maintenance side, we're projecting an increase of 1.7 million versus the original budget, and that's almost entirely in the track maintenance department, and almost all of that's within tire replacement. So the original budget request for tire replacement was for 3.8 million. We only put $1 million in the operating budget because we wanted to make sure that contract was in place and that we would actually be able to spend those dollars by June 30th this year. Everything is ready to go, and so we did reflect the full 3.8 million in the amended budget. And then on other outside services, we're seeing an increase of 2.3 million, primarily in rail operations as well, particularly 1.7 million for rail replacement at 11th and C, and then some hazard repairs both on Commercial Street and Massachusetts Ave as well. And then we're seeing a small increase in the bus operations for some facility repairs as well. So these outside services costs are projected to increase by 4.1 million in the amended budget. Moving on to purchase transportation. So this is our contracted bus service. We have two major contracts. The first is our contract with Transdev for operating the fixed route service out of our East County and South Bay garages. So those costs are projected to decrease by 776,000 or almost 1%. That's right in line with the scheduled change in revenue miles, which are decreasing 1% in the amended budget. The other contract we have is for the services that are operated out of Copley Park. So that's our minibus, which is a fixed route service using the smaller buses, and then paratransit, which is a demand-based service. So the minibus costs are decreasing by 350,000 or 5.6%. Part of that is due to decrease in the scheduled revenue miles, and then part of it is due to the fact that we have favorable performance bonuses as well. Paratransit, which is the demand-based service, is decreasing by 1.3 million or over 6%. The biggest factor here is that we had included a 70,000 per month or 840,000 per year COVID relief payment. That was a payment that was made to Transdev until service demand was reached 85% of pre-COVID levels for 3 consecutive months. We hit that benchmark in June of last year. So we have not been required to make that payment at all this year, and we won't make any future payments. So that was 840,000 in savings right off the top. We're also projecting a 1% decrease in billable revenue hours, and then we're seeing some favorable performance bonuses in that area as well. So overall purchase transportation costs are projected to come down by 2.4 million. Energy, so our two major categories here are electricity for powering the trolleys and now some of our buses as well, and then compressed natural gas, which powers the majority of our bus fleet. So on the electricity side, we're forecasting a very slight decrease in the rate, staying at about 3.90 for the year, or 39 cents per kilowatt hour. We are bringing down our forecast for consumption by about 4.7% based on the trend so far. We would be forecasting to be about 2 million favorable here. However, we did receive 2 catch-up invoices from SDG&E for 2 different substations that hadn't been billed for 3+ years. So reflecting that catch-up payment, we are projecting electricity expenses to increase by 86,000 or less than 0.5%. On the CNG side, we've seen favorable commodity rates so far. We're bringing down the commodity rate forecast by 18%. As far as the overall rate, which includes the San Diego gas and electric costs, we're bringing down the rate to $1.32 or by about 5%. We're not changing the consumption forecast for the mid-year budget. And so based on those assumptions, we're expecting to see about a $700,000 or 5% decrease in CNG cost. So our overall energy costs, which include gas, propane, as well as some of our other utilities, is projected to decrease by 459,000. Risk management. So here we're expecting about a 983,000 increase in total cost, or almost 8%. For claims, we are projecting to have a significant cost this year. We have several large cases that may or may not settle this year with unknown settlement amounts. I do want to remind the board that we do have $7.5 million set aside in a self-insurance reserve to cover these kind of extraordinary costs. So we are anticipating using a portion of these in FY26 and then refunding that or replenishing that over the next couple of fiscal years. Within risk, we are decreasing the budget for insurance premiums by 595,000, and it's primarily due to the property insurance policy costs, which came in lower than what we had initially projected. Last slide on expenses includes our remaining categories. I think the only one here worth mentioning is materials and supplies. So within that category, we had 1.2 million in the original budget for a ticket vending machine credit card module upgrade project. So we removed this budget from FY 26 and are pushing it out to FY 27. We're also cutting the cost in half. Typically within materials and supplies, we're talking about bus and trolley revenue vehicle parts. We're not expecting significant movement there in the amendment. We're increasing bus by 205,000 and then keeping the trolley revenue vehicle forecast flat. And then G&A costs are increasing 267,000, and then vehicle and facility leases, which is primarily our enterprise lease vehicle cost, is increasing by 178,000. So here you can see expenses summarized. Overall, we're projecting 471 million, which is a decrease of 2 million from the original budget, led by the decrease in personnel and purchase transportation, being partially offset by that increase in outside services. And here you can see our consolidated operating budget. So this includes all the different categories that we just talked about. So our recurring revenues is projected to decrease by 526,000. That's a decrease in passenger revenue, fortunately being mostly offset by the increase in sales tax. And then expenses are decreasing by 2 million. So our structural deficit in the amended budget is projected at 106.5 million. That's our recurring revenues minus our expenses. That is about $1.5 million better than what we initially projected in the original budget. Now, in order to get to our overall balanced operating budget, we have to include the one-time funding sources. So we have the 68 million coming from reserves. That will be the last of our operating deficit reserve. We're using the entirety of that this fiscal year. And then we have the 25 million that was shifted from the capital budget to the operating budget, and then about 14 million in SB 125 funding. So with those sources, we do have a balanced budget in the FY 26 amendment. That brings me to the staff recommendation that the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System Board of Directors enact resolution number 26-3, amending the FY 26 operating budget for MTS, San Diego Transit Corporation, San Diego Trolley, MTS Contract Services, and the Coronado Ferry. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer. We'll get a closing word from our CEO, then we'll take public comment, and then we will go to board discussion. Ms. Cooney.
So Gordon did an excellent job of laying out all the various components in the budget. This budget year, there's a lot of volatility in various forms. I'll mention, for instance, while our ridership looks lower, March all of a sudden is coming in preliminarily much higher than last March. So for ridership, it could improve from now until June. And then you have other volatility, and what do we know about fuel prices, for instance? What can happen in that regard, or tariffs being rescinded, or any of these things. So this is a snapshot in time. It's our, we'll be going forward, and we believe that we'll, by continuing on this path, achieve the budget that we're hoping to have come June. So just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you, Ms. Cooney. Clerk, do we have any public comment?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, let's open board discussion on this item, and we'll begin with Director Bush.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for your work on this. Definitely some concerns here. I do support the staff recommendation, though. I wanted to focus a couple things I wanted to focus on. The ridership drop, and then the fuel price, and what's going on globally with prices and how we're projecting for that moving forward. So starting with the ridership, why the drop in ridership? Why do we think, what's causing that?
So in looking at everything, it's across the board in our various, especially on rail. We're seeing the most significant drops on the orange line. But as I mentioned, we're seeing a rise again in ridership in March. And so it's too soon to say how that's going to play out March, April, May. But there's a lot of different factors, heavy rains that causes people not to want to use public transportation. They'll travel on days when it's not as heavy. We did have some weeks of that in January and February. It was softening already in the fall. we don't know if people have felt the pressure of moving around more with the federal actions with ICE. We don't know if it was more about affordability. We do know tourism is down. Does that impact how many people get shifts at the hotels, restaurant work, et cetera? So there's a lot of different factors. It's hard to really put your finger on one particular item.
Understood. So have we done any surveys of either employees such as the trolley operators, bus operators, or surveys of our customers about this?
Not really, not yet.
Okay, so I mean, those are some good like overall kind of explanations or theories, but and I still support this moving forward. But I think that if the next board meeting, are we going to have another budget update, or when is the next budget update?
So this will be the FY26 amended.
Mhm.
In April, we'll be bringing a preliminary FY27
Okay.
for estimates. We will be also bringing a performance monitoring report, which will have a more extensive discussion of ridership
Okay.
trends.
Oh, great. Okay.
And so that will also be hopefully in April, but it may get pushed to May.
Great. So I'm not looking for anything that would cost staff necessarily a large additional time or any additional formal studies. I just want to get more clear information on what was the cost. So what percentage of it, even if it's just an estimate or range, what percentage of it was because of the weather? What percentage is because of tourism? Because I'm not even clear from the ridership. Is tourism overall, is that 20% of our ridership? Is that 30%? So just having some more figures there, I think would help. It's encouraging that March looks good, but I just want to get some more information on which part of the ridership, and so that way we can address kind of what that is, because if we're having the discussion which is needed about increasing fares, then that can make it worse. So I just want to have all that information clear on that. So if we could in that April board meeting, get more details on why at least we think or theorize the ridership is dropping, that would help. And then the second part on the fuel prices and the seemingly ever expanding global wars and the situation in Iran, how are we projecting that, and how have we factored that in, like kind of, because I think this is fairly unprecedented, the restriction on fuel. And so I imagine the CNG and all the recent back and forth attacks on all these fuel facilities in the Middle East, like that's going to have an impact. I would expect at least for the next year. So how are we factoring that into the costs?
So the FY26 amendment does not reflect the conflict in Iran. That's going to be more prevalent for our FY27 forecast, where we are able to take that into consideration. So far, though, what we're seeing, especially on the natural gas side, is the most recent price we have is from March 1st, which was only a couple days after the conflict started. So it may or may not build in any of that, but it was one of the lowest commodity prices we've paid for CNG in a long time. So it doesn't really add up yet. We really need to see the figure that we'll get on April 1st to see if we'll be able to tell from that if there's going to be a dramatic impact on CNG. And then the CNG commodity prices will affect electricity, and it's all going to be bundled together. So there is not extra padding built in this particular item, just due to time.
Which makes sense, yeah, because it's more a look on the past.
We're definitely building in some wiggle room for the commodity for next year's budget.
Okay, that's a tiny bit encouraging though. So then, even though this is fairly recent, it's only been, I think, 3 weeks that this war started. So, but in the 3 weeks, what you've seen so far is basically no significant impacts. Is that fair to say?
One of the things that's interesting is like our local market for CNG can differ dramatically from the national market. We
okay.
typically almost always pay higher, but we haven't been moving in lockstep with the national increases. And so it really is a wait and see. We really want to see only a couple weeks left. We'll have that April price, and that's going to be pretty telling on how much extra we want to build in, if any, for next year.
Great. Well, that's encouraging. I just don't want us to be complacent about that. So I appreciate that. And overall, I appreciate staff's work on just being creative with the cut in expenses and all the efficiencies. So I appreciate your work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bush. This is an action item that will require a motion.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the staff recommendation, and I ask staff to bring some more details on the ridership numbers.
Thank you, Director Bush. Let's go to Director Dillard.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. I want to go back to page 11 for the recommendation, the top item, identifying and reflect any belt tightening opportunities. This is mostly directed to the directors. My concern is that I apologize for not being in the executive committee, that I missed it, because I would have definitely brought this up. I don't see in this whole presentation, with all the belt tightening that is recommended, that there isn't any belt tightening for the staff. And I think that at this point, I'd like to make an amendment that we freeze the staffs all the way from the top down for any raises. We shouldn't be just focusing on the bus drivers and the trolley drivers and the workers. I don't think that is a fair assessment of belt tightening. You're basically focusing on the lowest paid people and having their income frozen without the rest of the staff for MTS. And so I'd like to include an amendment to this recommendation to include staff from the top down.
If I could just correct, I'm sorry if it wasn't clear, but we have bargaining agreements with all of our unions, and those do include increases to their wages. So all of our bus drivers, flaggers, transit enforcement officers, they all have agreements with us, contracts that do increase their wages, and that's reflected in both the mid-year, and it will be reflected in the FY27 budget that we will propose.
Well, in my opinion, I mean, that's great. I understand that there's contracts and we have to, abide by them. And I know that there's contracts coming up, but it still doesn't negate the fact that the staff hasn't been affected by this at all. The rest of the staff from the top down. And I think at this particular point, we need to start making harder decisions about increases right now. I think that is overall, it's not even, really spelled out just what these increases have been. And I think that we should stop it right now until we balance the budget, that we seriously consider this. And so my amendment is to include the MTS staff for freezing any increases until we balance the budget.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate your point of view on how to do belt tightening and things. One of the things that we also are charged with is attracting, retaining, and keeping people who are experts in a very specialized fields of public transportation. So I think we would risk losing staff if we were to stay. The administrative staff is frozen. We have to honor the collective bargaining agreements that we have. So I have a trouble saying let's freeze staff when I'm not sure that's the issue. They are belt tightening in areas in G&A, in supplies or other kind of non-wage kind of things. There's an open position, a legal position that was mentioned earlier. So I think I'm satisfied staff is doing a good job of saying we're going to be as austere as we can be in this area. But I think to free staff would send a message that would be difficult to keep the people who are very good at what they do in the jobs that they have. So it would be demoralizing to say our pay is frozen, but we're watching other people get increases. We kind of have to treat everybody the same, in my viewpoint. So I would support the motion as it was stated.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Gordon, for the presentation. Spoke to this at Executive Committee, so I don't want to belabor it. I want to thank Member Dillard for, this is the sort of conversation we need to be having, just quite frankly. I think it's uncomfortable, but it's the sort of, everything should be on the table when we're having the conversations that we're having about the structural budget deficit, the possibility of raising fares, of freezing positions, which I don't think is a bad idea necessarily, but as we talked about before, there are impacts on frontline workers, or potential impacts at least, when those positions are frozen, in their ability to maintain the work levels that they have right now, of knowing or not knowing whether or not they'll have reinforcements there along their side in the future to do their work. And at a minimum, an analysis of what benefits and downsides there would be, and we talked about kind of what I referred to last week as up and down the ladder, making sacrifices. So I hear you on the potential of losing experienced leadership and folks with expertise. I just want to make sure that we as an organization are valuing all of our, and I'm not saying we're not doing this, but I think we need to be very careful in recognizing how not asking sacrifice at the top can be seen by folks who are on the front lines as not seeing their work of equal value. When you are working hard and barely making it, which is the reality for most people in San Diego, and know that there are folks who are making much more than you, what is equal is not fair. And so we just have to be very conscious about that in terms of, again, who we're asking to sacrifice and how. So if it's not an amendment, which I can understand not doing it necessarily on the fly here, I do very much think that it's one of the things that should be analyzed, and in no way whatsoever does that diminish the incredible value and expertise that we see from folks who've been here at MTS for a long time. And that both things can be true at the same time. But I do think, as we're having really hard conversations, if I'm going to ask a hotel maid who busts her ass every single day to pay more to get to work, I think it's fair to also say, and we've done everything we can to make sure that this increase that we are going to ask you for down the road is the smallest amount possible, because we've done everything that we can at the agency. So I appreciate the conversation happening, because again, if we're going to get through this, we're going to need to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations in the public setting, because that's what this job requires. And avoiding those uncomfortable conversations are how we won't actually address this in a way that gets us to our long-term goal, which is providing excellent public transportation to folks who need it. So thank you, Chair.
If I may, I did want to suggest these kinds of discussions would probably be better had during the roll up and the creation of next year's budget. As Board Member Ela Rivera mentioned, it's tough to make that kind of analysis on the fly with an active budget year that we're already in the middle of. When we design the budget, you all authorize a percentage increase for the staffs in the various parts of the organization. And it doesn't say, oh, everybody gets a 4% increase. That's not the way the budget works. But it would be, you know, if you wanted to say, let's budget 0 increase in FY27. That could be a proposal that we could discuss. And that way it would be, you could look from position to position. When you talk about administrative staff and management, as we call it, these are unrepresented staff, meaning they're not in one of the unions. Those include line supervisors who are supervising bus drivers and routes. Those include clerks who are doing very entry level work, all the way up to, you know, myself and the other people who are in the executive team. So it would be hard to do a blanket, don't give anybody a raise in this group. You can't have a supervisor, for instance, who's supervising bus drivers who are making more money than them, for instance. Otherwise, you can't get people to move into the supervising ranks. So there's a lot of nuances in this. And one other thing I wanted to add was we did do a complete salary study that was approved by the board last year that showed we were significantly below market in a lot of our positions. And so we adjusted them to get ourselves back to market. And so any decisions we make now will affect whether or not we continue to keep ahead of that trend. So that's kind of why I'm suggesting that rather in this action item today, we would bring it back when we start talking about next year's budget.
Let's go back to Director Bush.
Yeah, so process-wise, I don't think there was a second to my motion to accept this, but what I can do is restate my motion and include with an amendment that kind of addresses what Member Dillard is referring to, and just to respond to some of the back and forth we're talking about. I do agree that this is a more effective and productive conversation looking forward into the FY27 budget, because I don't see how we can have this discussion kind of almost retroactively since we're already mid-year. But I do appreciate and agree with Member Dillard, Member Ela Rivera's point that I think everything should be on the table. The bargaining unit discussion. So we have our bargaining unit employees with their MOUs, with their collective bargaining agreements. Those are really some of them. So that's more complex because some of them are actually, I think, in active negotiation. And I imagine at that active negotiation, we're asking them to make sacrifices, right? So there's that part of it. The employees are in active negotiation. There's also the groups that already have their contract approved. And so we would have to reopen, I think, negotiations in order to have that discussion. So that part I'm not really looking to address too much, but it's the ones, the more executive level employees and staff, and I think a lot of the folks in this room It is an uncomfortable conversation. And I think for me, the intent wouldn't be to punish anyone. It's not to hurt anyone. It's because we just have to put everything on the table. And there's a difference between like this. I think what Member Dillard is saying, it's not asking for cutting pay. It's holding or suspending the level of growth. And the reality is that you cannot compare a bus driver or a flagger to an executive level position. Like executives, they're just higher level positions. Again, this isn't an attack. It's just the financial reality that comes with more economic benefit. You are more economically stable. Someone who makes 150, 100,000, whatever, is much more financially stable than someone who makes far less than that, than the flaggers and the bus drivers. So that should be a consideration. But we just don't have that data. I don't know how many employees that is. I don't know what actually what would be the net benefit of that. Because I'm not sure that would be that much of a benefit, like pausing or freezing the salaries. I don't know how much that was. So, but I would like that considered, and I think that should be brought back in the April meeting. Because I think too often, I agree with Member Elo Rivera, we tend as this organization and many others, we tend to focus on the people at the top. We don't focus as much on the people at the bottom, the frontline workers that are making things happen. So I do want more, just to be fair to everyone. Yeah, but I think that should be brought back for discussion in April. So I'll restate my motion. I move to approve the staff recommendation, and I ask that staff bring back at the April meeting for FY27 budget an analysis of what an option of freezing salaries for executive or non-bargaining staff, what that looks like. So just an analysis, the data, the information of what that budgetary impact would be.
Thank you, Director Bush. As this conversation has unfolded, I have been giving consideration to the degree to which this conversation is germane to the item in front of us and whether it has been properly noticed. There is no question that staff salaries relate to the budget. I don't think that the discussion that has been brought up is actually germane to the operating budget mid-year amendment, because nothing about the conversation that we're discussing now would implicate that. It is germane to the FY27 budget discussion, the upcoming budget discussion. And I would say that the appropriate place then to bring these things up, and we can plan to have that discussion, would be during the regular process of the FY27 budget discussion, which will be coming up pretty soon.
And Chair, we do have a budget committee, right? I think that we don't have that's part of the executive.
It's part of the executive committee now, yeah.
Well, so, I mean, from a procedure standpoint, that makes sense what you're saying. That's true. So I'm okay with that, but at least we're putting it on the record for staff's consideration. So I just want to make sure that that's like, I just, to be honest, I don't want staff to come back in April and say, well, you didn't make a motion. This wasn't included in motion. So I do want this like analyzed. But I just, so I'm not sure how we as a board address that part of it.
I'll ask to see, when does the budget discussion start to come to the board?
We'll come to the executive committee at its next meeting, and I'm looking right now to see what that date is, on the April 9th.
So on April 9th, we will begin the FY27 budget discussion, and certainly staff salaries on some level will be a part of that.
Okay, well, I'll amend my motion then to just approve the staff recommendation and just, I guess, put the comments on the record. Still need a second though.
Okay, the motion that has been made is to accept the staff recommendation. I will second the motion, and we will go to Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple quick points. One, I think the word freeze it's being used in multiple ways right now. And I think it's just kind of important to note the two different ways that it's being used to make sure that we're all understanding it the same way. There's freezing positions, meaning we're not going to fill positions, correct? That's how that's in what's presented to us. That's what we're saying, right?
Correct.
So meaning not touching the pay of those positions because of the collective bargaining agreement, but not filling positions that are currently vacant.
It only is it has nothing to do with any collective bargaining units.
Right, correct.
Right. It only has to do with positions within the administrative staff, the non-union membership of the administrative and management staff.
But when in the slide, when it said freeze, we meant not fill. Is that
Not fill, correct.
right? And so there's not filling positions, and then there's freezing pay on positions,
Correct.
which was the issue raised by Member Dillard. So everyone here is comfortable with not filling. We have a secondary conversation that some of us feel like we need to have about the pay issue. And I just want, again, kind of making sure that I'm understanding it correctly, but also making sure that we're collectively understanding it the same way. That's accurate. As you understand it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The second thing, Chair, I as I said, I don't know that we should vote on that on the fly right now. And I want to make sure that in terms of precedent setting and what we're saying as a board, in terms of what we are able to do based on what is agendized, I do have concerns that saying that because it wasn't explicitly agendized, that sets the precedent that what staff presents to us, we have to vote up or down when it comes to budget time. So if we can't add things or take things out, well, you didn't say we couldn't take things out, but if we can't add things as additional reductions or for consideration for additional reductions, I do have concerns about what that means for our ability to, whether it's an executive committee or here as a full board, use the powers that we are supposed to have in budgeting. We see the downsides of that at the city, quite frankly, during the mid-year budget review process when we're presented with a budget changes from the mayor, and we essentially have to take them up or down. And for our as council members at the city of San Diego, it's been extremely frustrating at various points of time. And I worry that by not allowing even like the addition that Member Bush has suggested for additional consideration and review, we are essentially saying, staff, bring us your recommendations. We'll give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but we're not going to add anything to it. And again, I do have concerns that diminishes our power as board members. Just wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera, and I appreciate that. And there is no question that there can be amendments that are in order with any item that comes before this board. My understanding was that the tone of the conversation was around a freeze of salaries, but that would have no impact whatsoever on the item that is before us, which is the fiscal year 2026 operating budget, because even if we were to freeze salaries, that would not change the fiscal year 2026 operating budget. So the discussion that is being had is only pertaining to the FY 2027 budget, which is why I don't think it's germane to this item.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Not suggesting we do this, but just so, again, knowing that, so that we can all understand kind of procedurally how to move when we're moving forward. If Member Bush were to say in the motion, let's include freezes in this action, then would it therefore be germane and something that would be allowed? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, your concern is that we're not, what Member Bush is proposing is related to next year's budget, not this year's budget. But that brings us back to the point of, if the suggestion was, okay, then let's just freeze it now, mid-year, would you entertain that as part of a valid procedurally correct motion?
Probably not. And the reason is because if you were to freeze the salaries, they would remain the same through the FY 2026 operating budget. So basically you'd be saying, we're going to make a motion to keep the salaries, the approved salaries, the way that they are through the end of this budget year. And that's all you would be doing. You'd be basically making a motion to keep things the same.
Okay. Again,
Guys, just real quick, I think, so for me, it's just bringing back information for the next budget. So, and if staff understands it, but I do understand your point, Sean, about like not setting this precedent of like, we need to have some kind of flexibility and control. So like, I just want the information on freezes for the FY 27, because to me, it's like, we can't really do anything for FY 26 unless you were Member Dillard see differently.
There's no question that this board has the right to make amendments. I mean, we've made amendments regularly in the past. There's no question about this board's ability to make amendments. Part of my job is to decide what's germane and not, and that was my take on that. Okay, I'd like to move on because we've got a really busy agenda here. If there is a consensus, we'll take this up.
You have Director Foster.
Yes, which I will get to now and call on Director Foster.
Thank you. And just listening to the conversation, I guess I'll have to ask to restate the motion, just so I'm clear on what we're
To approve the
voting
staff,
on.
the motion was to approve staff recommendation.
Okay, and just in closing remarks, I appreciate that. I appreciate the conversation. But I do disagree with the chair's position on what's germane, what's not germane. If we have a motion on the floor and it is properly seconded, then there's a motion on the floor and the body is to take that motion up. We can always state and have on the record if someone feels the motion is out of order, but once it's on the floor and it's properly seconded, then the body should take action on it and we should move forward. Whatever comes about it after the fact, then we deal with that with our attorneys and so forth. I just want to be clear on that, I would like to think no one has the authority to per se make a decision on a motion that is properly has a proper first and second and on the floor. So thank you for that. I'll leave that there and look forward to the vote.
Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just want to say I agree with that. It is totally proper to vote a motion down if you don't feel that it is appropriate, but what is not appropriate, especially, and this is because the motion wasn't seconded, okay, but I'll take it, we'll deal with it moving forward. And I'm not even saying this as a person who necessarily agreed with the amendment. I'm saying this as a director who has been charged to make decisions on this board. And so we can have the discussion about whether we feel it is appropriate or not and vote accordingly. But the fact that the motion was switched and just based on legal advice, which was proper, it's advice, but the policy decision is up to us. So I just, want to make that clear as the way that I view my position on this board. And especially when it's a touchy subject, like the one we were discussing that's a very fine line that we have to walk and we have to be very careful. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Montgomery Stepp. Any further discussion on this item? All right, we have a motion in front of us to adopt the staff recommendation. I'm not even sure that it has been seconded. I seconded it. So it was all right. All right, it's been a long discussion. All right, we have a motion from Director Bush that I seconded to adopt the staff recommendation. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please take the roll.
Members, if you can please make your selections on the tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 14 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you, clerk. Item 17 is the fiscal year 2027 capital improvement program. We will get this presentation from Mike Thompson.
Good morning, Mike Thompson. I'm the Deputy CFO. I will be joined by Eli Belknap, who's the Senior Project Manager for our capital team, here, and then Mr. Mike Wygant, our Chief Operating Officer on the bus side. Before we get to the CIP for 27, I would give a little background for the board. Just as recall, there was board direction from last November where we want to move our target revenue ballot measure from November 26th to November 28th. So in order to do that, one of the things we need to do is shift $50 million out of the FY27 operating budget, out of the capital budget into the FY27 operating budget. So you'll see that in our draft proposed budget here. We're also looking for a goal of 10 million in annual operation savings beginning in FY27, which excludes service changes. We're also going to continue to pursuing additional funding from regional, state, or federal sources, including legislation to expand transit revenue options through tourism, luxury vehicles, or other options, as well as all operating revenue options on the table as well. And again, the goal is to balance our operating capital budgets through fiscal year 30 with our existing one-time funding, which we don't think we're going to get any more of at this point in time. And it allows the public the chance to decide at the ballot in 2028 and allows MTS time to react if the ballot measure ultimately fails. So when we wanted to quickly discuss what $50 million coming out of the capital to operating budget looks like. And we want to emphasize that we've been making substantial investments in state of good repair over the last 5-10 years to allow us to do this in the short term, take some money out of capital in the operating budget. We have invested over $700 million into state of good repair over the last 5 years alone. We do not have a backlog of deferred maintenance or anything to that effect. And even with taking $50 million out, we will still have $107 million in the FY27 capital budget in order to fund the projects that we need to fund. We also do have, since we've reduced service subs a little bit, we can also reduce our bus purchases a little bit as well. So we had some savings in the current year that's being carried over into next year, helping that way as well. So for these next 4 years to get us through FY30, we are going to be more tactical with our state of good repair approach and not just looking at things when they get to the end of their useful life, replacing them before they start causing any problems. Really look at the condition at that point in time as well to make sure, can we go another year? If we can, let's do that. Otherwise, if we need to replace it, we do have capital funding to replace things. And also look at when the funding is going to be needed. If we have a big, large project that's going to be spent over 3 years, we'll do the funding over 3 years as well to sort of match that up and allow us to save money in the short term to do whatever we need to do. And I'll turn over to Mike to give a little bit of history on the innovative clean transit policy.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Again, Mike Wygant, Chief Operating Officer here. So just a little history and refresher as the zero emission transition and the impacts to our capital budget. The original regulation from CARB in the state of California to actually get agencies to move towards a cleaner path than diesel was the urban fleet rule. It was developed in the late 1990s and adopted in 2020. That was actually the path for this agency to move to clean natural gas. There were 2 paths as part of that regulation. You could continue to do diesel or you could go natural gas, and there was advantages to one or the other. But really it was an emissions reductions regulation. So you had a baseline of what your emissions output was, and annually you had thresholds or milestones in which you had to reduce it by. And you did that primarily by buying newer, cleaner CNG vehicles in our case. There were some other modifications, but so later on, as part of the governor's goal to get to 100% zero emission vehicles, the original urban fleet rule was amended, more commonly known as the ICT or Innovative Clean Transit Rule. And that's where the regulation went from an emissions reduction regulation to a technology requirement. You see in the bottom right of this chart, what it was, it turned it into instead of an emissions reductions requirement every year, you actually went to a purchasing requirement as you bought new vehicles. And those are the 3 years where the milestones changed from 0 prior to 2023 to an agency of our size is 25% at 23, at 50% at 26, and 100% at 29. So as part of that goal, this agency approved a transition plan that we've developed. It was implemented, it was passed by CARB, it was approved by the board with the hope that being 100% zero emission by 2040. As part of the ICT, there are annual, what we call check-ins or comprehensive reviews. We've had 2 to this point, where CARB and the governor's office, GoBiz specifically, take a look at the technology. They look at the costs of the impacts and what it's actually doing to transit to see if some of their projections actually came out correct. If it's negatively impacting the ability for transit to meet its primary goal of providing transportation. Because within the regulation, they did not want to force this transition if it meant you cut your service just to support it. So I'll just kind of go over some of the current impacts from a cost standpoint. If you look at the chart there, you can see the cost of a natural gas bus in a 40 and a 60 foot. And in the BEV, or the battery electric version of it, there's a considerable increase to the capital cost associated with that. The hydrogen bus, which we do not have, but we keep very connected to that. Our partners to the north have some. They have even more of a premium cost. The infrastructure right now is projected for that full transition to impact to us to be $487 million. Also, you may remember, some of you, as part of the transition to actually complete the transition by 2040, there's a lot of construction projects. If you saw what's going on at Imperial Avenue, or if you've had an opportunity to see our South Bay facility, there's a large charging infrastructure at both facilities. Those construction projects have impacts. All of the equipment has footprint impacts, so thus the Clean Advancement Campus was necessary. So that had a current cost of $350 million. When we did the original transition plan in 2019, the total impact from baseline, in other words, we had continued on the natural gas path, continued to maintain them, to fuel them, invest even in their fueling equipment, but to transition 100% by 2040 to zero emission had about a $650 million additional cost, primarily on the capital side, some operating costs as you went into hydrogen too. We have some new lines because we've just recently revised all those numbers with some of the information we've gotten from OEMs today or from infrastructure construction projects. And just inflation in general has increased that number from 650 to over $833 million. We've spent some of that already, but that's the total cost of the transition. So as part of the ICT regulation I mentioned, as far as these comprehensive reviews, was to go back and look at where the technology is and what the impact is to the agencies. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of negative impacts. There's a lot less OEMs, there's a lot less fuel suppliers. In the hydrogen world, that's pretty much so dropped off. There's only one vehicle manufacturer and very few suppliers of hydrogen. The overall cost, part of the original regulation analysis, made some assumptions that the vehicles would be much more similar in price by now, and that has turned out, as you saw on the prior slide, not to be correct. So part of the ICT, they developed what we called off-ramps, and those were avenues for agencies to slow down or to stop or ask for exemptions if it was a negative impact to the agency. And those were fiscal or the lack of a vehicle, like in the case of our paratransit vehicles, starting last January, they were supposed to be at 50% purchase requirement. There is no vehicle that even gets close to our range requirement, let alone the ones that they did originally develop were like 3 times the cost. And so we have applied for an exemption under the board's direction for that, and we're granted it by CARB because in essence, that technology is not available. We've also stopped the next design phase at our South Bay facility. Imperial Avenue division, as you see, we're going to finish that project. That project has a lot of what we call green money. So money is only supposed to be spent towards that. So we wouldn't want to forgo that. And we do have another tranche of electric vehicles that was also funded with green money that's coming in. And so we need that infrastructure completed before those vehicles show up. Our Kearney Mesa division, we do have money to build that. The design is done, but we've also paused our East County facility going any further with that. Right now, it just has the original 2 plug-in chargers to support the pilot so that we can have some vehicles out there. And so right now, we're just kind of in a holding pattern with our budget issues as it relates to. So we're going to finish our IAD division, and once we get the final construction costs in for our Kearney Mesa division, we'll decide if we'll move forward on that. So.
Thanks, Mike. One other piece of background we added to this year's presentation is some open projects, a review of the current list of open projects as of March 1st. So we added a new attachment F to the agenda item. It shows all of the previously approved projects that are still open. It shows the budget by project, the expenses, including the contracts or purchase orders against it, and also shows the remaining budget for each project. And you can see in the summary table, we have over 115 active projects with budget of over $892 million. Most of that has been spent or encumbered already, $664 million. We do have $228 million of available funding there that's still being processed through those projects. I mean, it is a large list of projects, but we are going to have Eli talk about a few of the highlights there on those open project lists.
Good morning. As mentioned, my name is Eli Belknap, Senior Project Manager, MTS. The first project I will be giving you an update on is the KMD Bus Wash Hoist Replacement Project. That was completed in October 2025. Total contract value was about $4.5 million. It was a multi-year, multi-phase project to replace 13 total lifts in the maintenance facility at KMD. There were 12 in the maintenance building, 1 at the tire shop. The existing lifts were original to the construction of KMD. They experienced multiple failures, so they were due for replacement. So as part of the state of good repair replacement, we replaced all lifts. They were replaced with a variation of lifts, including single post, 2-post, 3-post, and platform lifts. The intent of the differing lifts is to provide variable maintenance services. Sorry. So you can see in the picture that middle lift can move up and down to accommodate both 40 and 60-foot buses, where the platform lifts, the buses drive on and get lifted up completely. Another improvement was that each lift contained a 25-gallon internal self-contained fluid reservoir. So we got to remove and eliminate above-ground storage tanks and service fluid. And it provides full flexibility for the full fleet of 40s and 60s. Next project is also call it a state of good repair project. We're replacing the VMS signs or VMS units. In 2025, the orange, blue, and green line VMS signs were upgraded to match the mid-coast design functionality. You can see on the left, they are much more easier to view color compared to the ones on the right that were not in a state of good repair. Another open project is the public address upgrade. It's currently in the design phase to upgrade the PA system at all orange, green, and blue and south trolley stations to ensure consistent public address quality with the new mid-coast stations. Another project is the trolley track improvements. That total contract value is just under $6 million. It includes the replacement of 10,000 ties on the blue line, as well as reconstructing 4 grade crossings, as well as removing a siding from Commercial Street. So you can see kind of a before and after what a grade crossing looks like, where you can see the deteriorated asphalt were being replaced by a new cast in place or a new precast concrete crossing. An additional project is the Meyer slope improvements. It's a slope stabilization and drainage improvement along the blue line south near East Meyer Boulevard in San Ysidro. They're experiencing kind of some heavy settling and drainage related to erosion. So we're installing an extensive earth moving and deep pile foundation construction to support about 675 linear feet of new retaining walls. That construction is actually scheduled to begin this month and will last about 9 months. And total project value for that one is about $6 million. Next is the Orange Line Signal Improvements Phase 1. So this project was broken out into 2 phases. The first phase, construction contracts, almost $27 million. This project includes 21 new signal houses, 3 cases, and 8.3 miles of signal cable. As well as 16 new switch machines and 2 new crossovers and 3 pedestrian crossings. So what's unique to this project is it includes several state of good repair projects, including the crossings and some of the equipment houses. So you can see that it kind of is all encompassing, as well as providing the upgraded improvements. It's several state of good repair projects into one. That project is in construction, started in July 2025, and is expected to be completed later this year. Or in other words, it's about 40% complete. And then after that, the next one would be the Orange Line Signal Improvements Phase 2. That project is estimated to cost about $55 million. And that one, similarly, It includes various and several state of good repair projects, including the replacement of 27 new signal houses, 4 cases, 22 new switch machines, 4 new crossovers, as well as a new diamond at Baltimore Junction, 9 grade crossing replacements, 3 station track improvements, 3 station track replacements, and just under 7,700 linear feet of rail. So that construction is estimated to start in fall of 2026 and be completed in early 2028. And we're currently bidding that construction contract.
So with that background in place, we'll now move on to talking about this next year's proposed CIP. We really talk about the funding levels first. We do have our recurring funding levels from all of our federal funds, also the Transportation Development Act and state transit assistance and low carbon transit operations program. All those funding sources, we get money every year based on a formula basis. So they are recurring every single year. Every year, we also have some funding sources that are one-time in nature. We call those non-recurring revenues, and that includes any competitive grant programs. We have some revenue in from Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. It was a competitive program that we awarded a couple of years ago that is funding the Orange Line Improvement Project. We also have some Senate Bill 125 funding that was one-time in nature that we're including in this budget as well. And then there's also other one-time funding or carryovers or transfers from closed project included in each year's budget. We did want to announce that we did get a major competitive grant award. The FTA has a grants for buses and bus facilities program. It had almost 400 million nationwide in competitive funding available. Over 300 projects were submitted and 223 of those were considered highly rated. And they were able to award to 98, and MTS was one of those. MTS received over $14 million for the Kearney Mesa Transit Center project. We purchased the land on Claremont Mesa Boulevard last year. And then once this grant is obligated in the fall, we can begin the design process and build out a new transit center at that site. We will need to match 20% of that $14 million in future fiscal year CIP with local funding. So just FYI, that part is not included in this year's budget. So looking at our revenues, we have a total of 115 million in federal funding, formula funding. Part of that is going to go into the operating budget to fund preventive maintenance. So a net of 37 million of funding will remain in the CIP. We also have a net of $4 million of TDA after a $50 million shift to operations. And then we have about $19 million of STA, another $6 million of STA state good repair, another pot of money that we received, and then about $8 million of LCTOP. And then the other funding sources on the slide are all non-recurring in nature. We talked about TRCP and the ZETCP from SB 125, and then that discretionary grant. So in total of 107.6 million, 33.3 million is non-recurring in nature, and the other pieces will recur each year. So as we develop our project list, we do have some guiding principles that sort of define how we approach our CIP every year. We do have board policy 65 around transit asset management. And that policy states that MTS is committed to effectively manage its transit assets and maintain its system in its state of good repair to support safe, efficient, and reliable transit services across the organization. And typically, we try to fund the state of good repair type projects first, because we do have a large system that needs ongoing replacement. And our 20-year CIP alone, we have almost $4 billion of state of good repair needs, and that's what the chart is showing to the right. MTS is also required to comply with applicable maintenance regulations of the FTA, also the Federal Railroad Administration, and also the California Public Utilities Commission. So we do base our capital project prioritization and other capital management decisions on that safety and asset criticality, the condition of those assets, performance of those assets, match that against available funding, and then evaluate alternatives to consider the full life cycle benefit, costs, and risks as part of our process. So our process began last September. Each department across the agency updates a 20-year forecast of what their area looks like, then also submits specific project requests for the next 5 years. Then each department will also prioritize those project lists. Now that project list is then consolidated across the agency. And then we have a capital project review committee, which is made up of internal staff and typically SANDAG. that meets, and then the final prioritization list is generated. Projects with the safety and our operational needs are typically priority 1, and the committee reviewed and CEO approved that all priority 1 projects this year were at least partially funded. And then once the project list is done, there is a Title VI analysis conducted on that list, and no disparate impact on minority populations or disproportionate burden on low-income populations was found. So that 5-year submission across the agency, it was a total 5-year need of $1.2 billion. Again, majority of that is state-of-the-art repair. You can see the chart on the right breaks it down by our major categories. Revenue vehicles alone is 300 million of that. And then we have about $80 million for facility construction projects, 247 million for infrastructure projects, and then 57 million of other equipment. So that is all the state-of-the-art repair categories. It's again, $700 million, 58% of the overall need. We do have another $500 million, of other initiatives. Things are like expansion type things, or all the ICT stuff is included as other initiatives. So within this request period, we have the Kearny Mason Transit Center, we have all the zero emission bus charging infrastructure, we have placeholders for the Clean Transit Advancement Campus, even though we don't think we'll be able to fund it. And then all future transit center projects are also in that other initiatives category. Again, $1.2 billion need over those 5 years. For next fiscal year alone, there was over $191 million of project requests, 42 projects in total made requests. We only have $107.6 million in available funding, so we're only able to fund 56% of those requests. So we are about 80% of that is going towards state repair, including about $39 million towards bus vehicles, $15 million towards facility and construction projects, $27 million to rail infrastructure, which is primarily the Orange Line Improvement Project, and then about $5 million for other equipment and installations. And then Innovative Clean Transit, we are funding an additional $5.6 million towards IED and KMD. And then other initiatives is primarily the Kearny Mesa Transit Center and some other station projects. So again, 32 projects funded. Within attachment B, you can see the overall all the 5-year requests in there, and you can see what's funded and what wasn't funded, as well as what the need is by project over the 5-year. Then attachment C is just a shorter list of just what is being funded, and it shows the brief descriptions and timing of those projects as well. So typically spend time at the category level, not looking at individually 32 projects. So starting with the bus revenue vehicles, we do have a fleet plan that maps out the replacement cycle for all of our buses. We try to fund this first to keep the state repair on the bus fleet as good as possible in order to lower maintenance costs, because as those buses age, they get much more costly to maintain, and also they're not as reliable in the field. So we basically look at the annual goal is trying to replace about 1/12 of our large buses, because it's a 12-year life cycle, to sort of smooth out that funding plan. We do have over 400 40-foot buses, including 26 that are battery electric. We have over 120 60-foot buses, including 12 that are battery electric. We also have the commuter express fleet, a minibus fleet that are smaller buses that do fixed route, and then similar minibuses that are just for ADA. There's over 100 of those. And then we'd also have 2 battery electric vans that we added in this last year. So over 700 vehicles in the fleet that we're trying to smooth out that funding plan. So for this next year, we are planning on funding $39 million towards bus replacement. We do have some carryover from FY26 since we sort of reduced the amount of buses we're purchasing in FY26 due to service levels. We are planning on purchasing another 25 CNG buses, 25 40-foot battery electric buses, and then 13 60-foot CNG buses, as well as 25 ADA paratransit buses. Again, that's $39 million of funding. We do expect to see that number grow because we are having a little bit of carryover this year. So that's why 28's projected number is a little bit higher. And then as buses get more expensive, we do ratchet that up a little bit in the out years. So the total 5-year need just for buses is $289 million. On the light rail vehicle fleet, on the trolley side, we do have 168 vehicles in this fleet. These have a 25-year life, and they're actually also more expensive. So when we start doing these projects, we tend to save up for years ahead of time before these projects even start. We are just now finishing our SD10 project, which replaced all the high floor SD100 trolleys. So that is about done. And then we were supposed to start saving this year for the SD7s. They went into service in 2004. They were our first low flow cars. They are over 20 years old now. There's 11 of those. So 11 at current prices, it's about $53 million in total project costs that we were going to plan on saving about 1/5 each year. We are going to delay this project until after the ballot measure. Once we know what's going to happen with MTS service levels, we will know if we need these or not. Based on today's service levels, we do not need these 11 vehicles right now. But once we figure out what we're doing in service, we might need to place in future. So while it's requested in there, we are not planning on funding this because we don't need the vehicles at this point in time. The next category are facility and construction projects. As a reminder, we do have a number of maintenance facilities. We have the trolley yard and buildings A, B, and C, which are down behind us. We also have the Imperial Avenue Bus Division down the street. We have a Kearney Mesa Bus Division. We have a South Bay Bus Maintenance Facility, an East County Bus Maintenance Facility, as well as a Coakley Park Division, which does our minibus and ADA fleets. So all those things require upkeep on an annual basis. We also have 68 major passenger facilities that do require upkeep on a major basis. And those things lately has been elevators and escalators that we're replacing on the facilities, a large cost for elevators as those things are aging. So for this next fiscal year, we did receive 15 project submissions. We're only able to fund 10 of those projects, and all of that funding is being towards passenger facilities this next fiscal year. We are deferring the bus maintenance requests and also the rail. They sort of reprioritize their list and push their stuff out a couple of years. We feel everything in the facility side can make it another year, and we're focusing on the priority on the passenger facilities this next year. Again, almost $15 million in funding in this proposed CIP. The 5-year need for facility and construction projects is $83 million. We also have a rail infrastructure category, which is all the stuff related to our trolley system. It's nearly $5 billion in total system assets that do require maintenance over the life cycle. We have 2 different types of rail projects. One we consider called track, and it really includes everything related to the track, including that special track work and the crossovers that we spend a lot of time replacing. The other is the maintenance of wayside, and typically that's the elevated track and the drainage and also the electrification with the substations. This next fiscal year, 10 projects were submitted. We're going to be able to fund 8 of them, and 2 of them are not going to be funded, need to be deferred. It's $27.1 million in total funding. That includes about $18 million towards the major Orange Line improvement project that is ongoing. We will need to fund Orange Line improvement again in FY28 as we complete out that project. There's also other special track work projects, some grade crossing projects, and some substation electrification projects as well included in there. 27 million total funding, $7 million being deferred, and then the total 5-year need for just rail infrastructure stuff is $246 million. Our last safety repair project is just other equipment, and it's primarily the maintenance cleaning equipment for bus and rail. It's also a lot of IT infrastructure type stuff, like our VMS sign replacement. We did receive 9 projects, and we were able to fund 8 of those, and 1 is being deferred. On the operations side, it's a lot of smaller equipment replacement type stuff. On the admin side, it is more VMS signs for Midcoast and for the BRTs, as well as a couple IT projects. So again, about $5 million being funded, $500,000 being deferred. Excuse me. Yeah, $500,000. And then about $56 million over 5 years that is required for this type of state-of-the-art repair project. So our next slide is just rolling up state-of-the-art repair need over this 5-year period. You can see we're funding $85.5 million in our current year. So we're deferring $16.7 million in its current year that we'll have to need to slide in FY28. And over that 5-year period, we need $700 million just to maintain our existing system based on how things look today. That is 144 million a year. So it is a little challenging when we're only funding about $100 million for capital over the next 4 years. So that's be one of the things that we continue to go after very aggressively, any competitive grant programs to try to help fill that gap. We do have funding identified for about 56% of those state repair needs after we shift money from capital to operations. So looking at our other initiatives, starting with ICT, we have $450 million need over the 5-year period. Again, Mike talked about, we are putting a pause on this. We are going to complete IAD and KMD overhead charging infrastructure, and then we will also buy buses for those once the infrastructure is complete. But doing any additional infrastructure at our bus divisions is going to be delayed at this point in time unless we get competitive funding for those type of things. Also, it's an iterative process. Once you do one little section on IAD, you need to come back and do another section before trying to get to 100% battery electric buses. So we just really push it, also pauses buying more buses as well, because we need the charging infrastructure in place first before we start buying the actual battery electric buses. So we are funding some here, but most of this will probably be deferred until after the ballot measure. Other initiatives, we're funding 3 projects. The main one here is that Kearney Mesa Transit Center we talked about, getting that large competitive grant award really fast track this project. So we have that $14 million of federal funding in there. We also are putting additional $1 million towards the Meyer Boulevard pathway beautification. And then we're also parking $1 million for transit amenity improvement projects in advance of the new policy being developed and leaving the board some flexibility once that policy in place of projects that you would like to see there. So we're funding $16 million of other initiatives in this current fiscal year. The 5-year need for transit center type projects is about $67 million over the 5 years. So this next slide compares our project needs with our available funding available. And you can see the state grid repairs we talked about, $700 million over 5 years. Our other initiatives is $500 million over those 5 years. Primarily that is ICT related. So again, $1.2 million in needs. Available revenues as of today is $432 million between our formula funding and already awarded competitively grant funding. So we do have a $800 million gap. Again, we will be going after every competitive program possible to help fill that gap, but we are currently only 35% funded in our 5-year CIP. And that brings me to the staff recommendation, is that the MTS Board of Directors approve the fiscal 2027 capital improvement program with the estimated federal and non-federal funding levels, which was attachments A and B. And as the federal appropriation figures are finalized and our other project funding sources become available, I allow the CEO to identify and adjust projects for the adjusted funding levels. The second part is to recommend that SANDAG Board of Directors approve the submittal of our federal section 5307, 5337, and 5339 applications for this year's CIP. And then also recommend that SANDAG Board of Directors approve the amendment number 16 of the 2027 Regional Transportation Improvement Program in accordance with this CIP. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, we will now open board discussion on this item, and we will begin with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation and for the overview of our capital improvement projects. We spoke about this in executive committee, but I want to highlight a few critical points. I very much appreciate seeing this very comprehensive list of CIPs, including all open projects and final funded projects. I think it's useful to the board and the public to understand how our CIP projects are planned and also funded, considering they comprise a significant portion of our budget. I keep on saying this, transparency is key within the CIP project decision making process. I think it would benefit the board to understand more about who comprises the capital improvement project review committee, which my understanding is that it's an internal group of MTS staff members. I am most interested in how the review committee uses resources like the equity listening tour
or Title VI analysis in the process? For instance, is there a score system? What is considered as part of a criteria in regards to scoring our CIP projects? But overall, thank you for the context that was provided this year. I said this in executive committee. I don't think I recall seeing such a high level of details. So thank you for that. Also, the CIP projects prompted conversations about how well grants can be leveraged. Over my years as an elected official, I have urged and really pushed for agencies, particularly in my case, the city of San Diego, to pursue federal and state grants. I think it's a great accomplishment for MTS to be awarded the Federal Transit Administration grant for buses and bus facility program grants. I am not surprised because Mike does an incredible job in that department, but I certainly wanted to give kudos to you and to your whole team. I think for that one, we were, how many applicants were there for that one?
300.
300, and we got the application. That's awesome. So kudos to you. Thank you for your work, and I will make a motion to support staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Let's go to Director Bush.
Yes, I just want a clarification on the projects that aren't being funded. So can we go back to the project list? And what were the projects that are not being funded for this upcoming FY27?
There's a number of projects that aren't being funded. I guess you're looking by certain categories or in general. So state repair, there's about 5 bus projects on the facility side that weren't being funded, that are being deferred. There was a $7.7 million on the track side. I believe that was 4 projects on track infrastructure that are being deferred as well. And then the other equipment installation was just 1 project that was being pushed out a year. The actual project list is in attachment B. If you want me to go through any specific ones or.
No, that's okay. I think so. One of the concerns I had was on the orange line and understanding how, like, to what extent that was almost like a state of good repair or kind of, I guess, urgent or more of like a safety a priority. And the reason I say that is because if ridership is dropping on there and we have so much growth and demand, and just from a business standpoint, right? And I get, geographies, I'm not trying to pit, regions against each other, but the reality from a business standpoint is the blue line in that corridor just generates the most revenue per capita. And so if we're having investments, I just want to make sure that we're not deprioritizing important areas like especially like San Isidro. I'm a big supporter of the ITC, and I think that needs to move forward. And I don't want something like if it's for example on the orange line and it's not urgent, I'd like more analysis on that. And I don't necessarily even need it for this, but to Director Moreno's point, like just moving forward, some more understanding of what staff is considering when they're making those decisions on prioritization.
Okay. Yeah, the Orange Line project is being partially funded this year and partially funded next year, just based on the timing of when we think we're going to spend it and also an available funding. But it really is more of, we don't think we'll need all that money this year, so we're not funding all the Orange Line project. And the Orange Line project, that major project, is a great example of, it was stated repair. It was a stated repair looking a few years out, and the grants team packaged it all together, and we're able to get major competitive awards from the state to really fund that project. But it is really stated repair. It is on process, and none of that is being deferred or impacted.
Okay, understood. And then how overall on the ITC, where is the intermodal transit center at in terms of the CIP and process and phase?
So MTS contributed money to the planning studies for that to Sandag. And Sandag is the lead on that project.
So do we have
San
any?
Isidro.
Okay, but do we have any information on the phasing of that, or what, when it starts construction?
We're asking for them to come here and give you a full presentation on that project.
Okay.
Their timing just didn't work out to get it here for this meeting.
Okay, do we know when they're coming back? Or coming?
I don't remember what they said. No. Our planning director is shaking his head no. We do not know.
Okay, yeah, so if we could get an update on that, because I see that as a really important project regionally. Obviously, that's Director Moreno's district, but it's a very key, important regional, and so much of our ridership is coming from Mexico. So and there's real estate opportunity, maybe housing, just a larger opportunities there, I think, for MTS as a whole.
Thank you, Director Bush. Let's go to Director Hall.
I just wanted to second the motion.
Okay, we have a second from Director Hall. Let's go to Director Foster.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the clarification on the orange line and the safety, the reasons for prioritizing. That is a major line that runs through my district. I am concerned about the ridership, things that came up and the things that are associated with that, but I hope that it's just a matter of trending and global things that are currently happening that I think hopefully we'll see a shift. The one question I do have, and maybe it relates to the previous item, but I understand that there's still, at least the last time I drove, I believe we still have some outstanding work in regards to Aikens and the channel there. I believe I still see some temporary shoring and things in place. But where is that covered at? Is that covered in the FY 2026 budget and repairs, or are we carrying things over to 27 as we're approaching 27? How are we handling with that? And also, where are we at with the any federal funding or things of that nature to get that wrapped up and done?
Heather Fury, Director of Capital Projects. On the first piece, we had $1.5 million was part of the FY 26 CIP. That money is to go to 100% design, to put in some tiebacks under the wall, clean up the top, and then put a clean concrete cap on it, and then fencing on top of that. We just got 65% drawings for that work, and I'm hopeful that probably summertime we'll have 100% and can put that out to bid. We've also been coordinating with the City of San Diego to do their repairs on the drainage side of the wall. So the engineers have been going back and forth on that. I don't have an answer on the federal question.
We have received some federal funding, or not federal funding, insurance funding for the projects, but the federal has not come through yet.
All right, well, we are anticipating some federal funding, or are we anticipating that, or are we in a position where we said they're not giving us?
Yeah, we don't. A lot of times these FEMA type things, they lag many years before they finally get funded. And it really does require an appropriation through Congress. So
well,
we're monitoring it with our lobbyists.
And maybe we fall back and have some offline conversations, see where I can try and bring some additional energy to the conversation and some support with our delegation. I'm more than happy to sit down and have those conversations. I think I'll probably go back to the city and have some conversations about the city portion of the work, and maybe we get on the phone together and have a meeting just to make sure we're all on the same page, because this is taking quite some time to get repaired. I still have temporary fencing and certain things up that in my mind creates certain safety issues along that Aikens Street. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Director Foster. Seeing no further board discussion, we have a motion from Director Moreno and a second from Director Hall. Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make your selections. Chair, the motion passes with 14 members voting yes and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Just a quick time check here. We've got 3 remaining items on our discussion agenda. We've got 2 closed session items. I will ask Mr. Boyd if we can get a fairly condensed version of the comprehensive operational analysis update, just given the time that we're at. We do need to take up the public hearing on the Route 110 discontinuation. The fare change study update was something that the executive committee wanted to the board to hear. It's an informational item. We'll see how we're doing on time, but we do need to get into closed session around 11:30. So with that, we will turn it over to Mr. Boyd for an update on the comprehensive operational analysis.
Sure. There's about like 10, 15 minutes. Is that good or?
The 10 side is better than the 15 side.
Better. Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. Brent Boyd, Director of Planning and Scheduling with MTS. I'm here with Melissa Sather and Russ Chisholm from our consultant team on the comprehensive operational analysis from Transportation Management and Design. The COA, it's an evaluation of our existing transit services and ultimately will result in two different scenarios. A service expansion in the event of a ballot measure or some other revenue increase, or a reduction in services, which would address the fiscal cliff if we don't get additional funding. So we've gone through the existing, we came here in September, talked about the existing conditions report. And then October, we did a board workshop where we did some interactive activities, getting prioritization on transit issues, transit funding from you, and doing some trade-offs and that type of thing. So TMD is going to recap that. And we also did task 3, which is the evaluation of Elevate 2020 projects. We did a similar effort back in 2020 for potential sales tax measure, evaluate a bunch of different projects, see what would be included in there. We're re-looking at those to see if they stand the test of time, if they've still relevant after COVID and such. So TMD is going to present analysis of those 2 projects, and all of the reports are in your board packet also. So there's 4 different deliverables in there. So I'll turn it over to Melissa.
All right, good morning. Brent went through these. So wanted to give a little bit of a recap of the workshop we did with the board back in October. We had given an overview of the bus network design strategies and talked about trade-offs and the difficult decisions that need to be made moving forward. Talked about how good design means creating an attractive product for MTS and its customers, matching service to underlying market demand, making transit useful for as many people and as many trip purposes as possible, and planning routes that can be operated reliably and form a cohesive network. So the main part of the workshop was this bus bucks exercise, which we did twice during the workshop, once at the beginning and then once at the end after our conversation. So the board members were given $100 to invest in 11 different service categories, and the results of that polling's on the right. And then the numbers across the x-axis are showing the total amount of dollars invested in those categories. The gray lines show the results from the first round, and then the green and red bars show the results from the second round. So a couple of key takeaways. One is that more frequent service received about 1 in every $4. And then had an increase after our conversations. Safety and security improvements came in with the second highest amount of investment. More weekend service saw about a doubling of investment dollars between the first and the second round. And then certain improvements saw a decrease between the first and second round, and routes to new places shown at the bottom decreased to $0 in the second round. Happy to go back to any of these in more detail. We also talked with the board about a series of different planning trade-offs, talking about, when looking at different options, where the board lands on different sides of different trade-offs. And so looking at, different questions of investing in more frequency or expanding coverage, board landed towards investing in more frequency, a balance of adding service during the evenings and weekends with continuing to invest in peak hour commutes. Also a balance right in the middle of prioritizing short distance community-based trips with longer distance regional trips. So acknowledging the region has a huge variety of trips and riders that need to be served with the network. We also talked about different strategies in our service reduction scenario of service changes that could be made. One was talking about preserving service in areas with the highest demand and greater ridership against preserving service, some level of transit for all riders, And the votes you can see with the X's here, we're leaning more towards preserving service in areas with the highest demand and ridership. Lean more towards allowing transfers if it results in lower operating costs. Landed closer to the middle in terms of discontinuing service to reinvest resources in higher ridership parts of the network versus keeping service and exploring cost-effective options. And then finally, when talking about the trade-off between increasing fares and having to cut more service, lean more towards introducing higher fares, but having fewer service cuts. And all of this comes together to form the guiding principles that we'll use to develop the network plans.
Good morning. What we just wanted to share very briefly is how the guiding principles are formed and how they're used. The key area in developing them is input from yourselves and the public in terms of establishing the values and priorities for the COA. And then the technical guidance comes from the market analysis, service evaluation, and industry best practices. And those come together to form the guiding principles, together with the objectives of the service reduction and growth scenarios, together with MTS staff input. Those come together in a draft plan. That plan will go back to you for review, go back to the public for review. And based on those values and priorities, we will make changes in the draft plan and finalize it to potentially move forward. Guiding principles fall into several categories and they differ by scenario. I won't go into all the details here, but we do cover frequency, which will be important in both scenarios. Establishing a very strong all-day, all-week network that maximizes benefit to as many people in your service area as possible is important in both. It manifests itself a little bit differently in each. We want efficient and consistent design. We want to target the investments and reductions, target the investments where they'll do the most good under the growth, and target the reductions where they're going to have the least impact on the overall network. And lastly, part of the fare discussion, and this came out of the October work. Moving on to task 3. We took what was put together with Elevate LCD 2020, and we broke it into 4 main groups: transit service expansions and enhancements, transit investments, access, equity, and rider experience improvements, and then lastly, supporting programs. By prioritizing this, it'll allow MTS to kind of build on progress since then. Obviously, this took place before COVID. A lot has changed since then. I want to make sure that the overall system goals and guiding principles will ensure a coherent network of services. We want to formalize service tiers, help the public understand the different transit services and how they fit in the overall network. We want to continue successful pilots. And we want to support initiatives through strategic partnerships with local and regional partners, but not necessarily direct funding. So in looking at that, what do the recommendations look like coming out of this? Under the transit service expansion, the trolley enhancements, bus enhancements, expanding the rapid network are all things that we're recommending you carry forward. The transit investments, trolley to the airport, would move forward, but it's been picked up by Sandag. The UTC Skyway to Sorrento, Mesa, and Valley. We're not proposing to advance that or recommend advancement right now. There's other pieces that need to be in place first. A lot of coaster decisions to be made and first last mile connection issues that need to be ironed out. So that one's not proposed for moving forward. San Ysidro is being picked up by Sandag. The high-speed transit improvements, yes, and the trolley grade separations are all moving forward or recommended to move forward. The access, equity, and rider experience improvements are all recommended to carry forward. And then supporting programs, this supportive city grant program, the proposal here is to focus on strategic partnering, but not funding, given the state of affairs, here at MTS at this time. Then lastly, Sandag will lead a purple line, blue line coordination study.
So in terms of our next steps, we're working with MTS staff to refine our draft network scenarios using the board and community input and the existing conditions analysis, as well as industry best practices, looking at that growth scenario of about $60 million in additional funding and a reduction scenario of $60 million in savings and annual operating expenses. And our current plan is to present those network scenarios to the board for consideration later this year.
And before we get into questions or comments about the COE, just wanted to mention that we did finish a series of outreach events with our operating divisions. We went to all 5 bus operating facilities and the trolley facility at the end of February and beginning of March. We also had an online survey available for all the operators, and we got over 300 responses. So we've gotten some pretty good feedback from the operators. And that's something that we're digging through the responses right now, and we'll forward those on to TMD for analysis for development of future networks. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much for the update and all the work that has gone into it. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, this is an informational item. No motion is necessary, but we will open it up to board discussion if there is any. Otherwise, we will move directly into item 19, which is the public hearing on the Route 110 discontinuation. And Brent Boyd is going to provide that presentation as well.
And while they're getting ready to set up, Russ and Melissa, you can, while they're getting ready to set up, I just wanted to let you know that we're not just waiting for the final report on the COA. We've been using the data that we're seeing and the principles that we were discussing with the board at the workshop to try to find efficiencies in the meantime, because we do want to get, as we mentioned, we're trying to stretch out our fiscal cliff, and we've got a lot of strategies we're working on at the same time. So this Route 110 is actually being in this recommendation from staff is being informed by the COA and what we have learned through this process. So I will turn it over to Brent.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. Brent Boyd, Director of Planning and Scheduling. Again, as Sharon mentioned, we've been looking at the COA, even though that's geared for a couple of years down the road, we've been looking at it to identify some short-term operational improvements. We came up with a proposal here that saves about $360,000 in annual operating budget, does not leave anybody without transit service, and actually improves service for about half of the people riding the route. So the 110, it's an express route from Mira Mesa to downtown San Diego, and we are proposing discontinuation, but we do have other improvements that we'll talk about that helps mitigate this change. Per MTS Board Policy 42, which is our policy that evaluates transit and guides transit service changes. Any major service change, which includes a route discontinuation like this proposal, must be approved by the Board of Directors contingent on a public hearing, which is what we're doing now, and a Title VI analysis, which is in your board packet and we'll briefly talk about in this presentation. Ultimately, we'll end with a recommendation that the Board of Directors receive public testimony and approve the discontinuation of Route 110. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Chris Studdy, who's our Manager of Planning and Analytics, and he'll take us through the details of the proposal.
Thanks, Brent. Again, Chris Studdy. So Route 110 provides service along Mira Mesa Boulevard, traveling to Miramar College Transit Station, and then goes directly downtown with 4 trips in the morning, and then does the reverse of that with 4 trips in the afternoon. The bulk of the ridership boards or lights at Miramar College Transit Station, the last stop before it gets on the freeway in the morning, and the first stop after coming from downtown in the afternoon. Ridership has been declining since 2016, and then significantly declined with the COVID-19 pandemic, never fully recovering and hovering around 80 average weekday passengers per day. Just for context, that's 10 boardings per weekday trip on a 38-seat bus. Going into the passenger profiles on Route 110, So MTS staff recently conducted a survey trying to just get more information on I-15 riders, including Route 110. But majority of them from that have a subsidized fare. And then going into the Sandag 2023 origin destination survey, there was 100% access to cars, or how 100% of households had access to cars for those that were surveyed. Nearly all used a regular non-discounted pass. Just an example of a discounted pass would be an SDM or youth fare. And then Route 110 were typically higher income levels, and this was seen kind of in the survey that we did as well with 110 passengers. So in addition to the discontinuation of Route 110, there's a package of other changes that we're going to be doing with service to Miramar College Transit Station. So there's plans to add 2 morning trips on the Route 921 eastbound to cover the existing span. As you can see in the map on the right, the black hash line is Route 110. The orange is Route 921, so it would cover the alignment of the route. And then in addition to that change, Rapid Express 290 is planned to serve Miramar College Transit Station. You can see it's the yellow line that's going down I-15. It would use the direct access ramps, serve Miramar College Transit Station, and then proceed directly to downtown, similar to what Route 110 currently does after it leaves Miramar College Transit Station. This, with the Rapid Express, there would be a premium fare attached to that. And then customers would also have access to Route 20 and Rapid 235, which also goes to downtown. The estimated effects of this, 40 passengers would be affected. None of them would be left without service, going back to the additional trips on the 921 where the 110 operates and the 921 currently doesn't, but that would cover that portion. And then 21 passengers would be able to use Rapid Express 290 from Miramar College Transit Station. 19 would have to transfer at the station. And then as Brent mentioned earlier, this is net annual savings of $361,000, bulk of that from the discontinuation of Route 110, and then slight increase with 921 with the additional trips, and then the modifications to 280 and 290. And I think just going back to the previous slide, one thing just to be clear, so Rapid Express 280 would serve Rancho Bernardo Transit Station, which is currently the start of Rapid Express 290. And so Rapid Express 290 would serve Sabre Springs as the starting point, and then Miramar College Transit Station before going downtown. Going into performance, Route 110, 290 and 280 are some of the lowest, or I guess have the highest subsidy per passenger, which does equate to lowest performance in this category. With these changes, both of those are expected, or all Rapid Express 280 and 290 are expected to increase in performance, and then the system overall would increase as well. Tying it back to the guiding principles discussed from the COA update and the October workshop, this is focused on allowing transfers to more effectively use the system, really putting the system in MTS and Metropolitan Transit System, focusing on productivity, and then a commute focus as well, which you'll see in a little bit with increased span and trips provided with Rapid Express 290 compared to the current 110 service. So for current service on Mira Mesa Boulevard, we have the Route 110, 4 trips in the morning, 4 trips in the afternoon. 921 provides 30-minute service for the bulk of the day. And then 237 provides 15-minute service in the peak periods. With that, Route 110 would be discontinued, and then the additional trips on 921. That 30-minute service on 921 is important transitioning to service on the I-15 and the plan change with 290. So Miramar College Transit Station would have a net increase of 3 trips with 290 starting earlier and ending later. It will provide 30-minute service to downtown with kind of an easy connection with that 921 covering most of Route 110. Route 20 and Rapid 235 would be unchanged. And then going into travel times, 110 and 290 would have essentially the same travel times to downtown San Diego. If those weren't an option for customers, they would also have access to Route 20 and Rapid 235, around 15 to 20 minutes longer. With Title VI, so per our board policy, the discontinuation of a route requires a public hearing and Title VI analysis. Title VI analyses are designed to prevent discrimination based on race, color, and national origin. The analysis found that there was not a disparate impact or a disproportionate burden, and that full analysis is provided in your agenda packet. Going into the public input survey, staff was at Miramar College Transit Station on February 19th. The survey was posted on all Route 110 stops in Mira Mesa that same day. And then we distributed the survey for anybody that might have missed it on all the morning trips on the Route 110 on February 24th, and then received about 60% of the estimated 40 unique passengers a day on Route 110. For the public input hearing, the discontinuation of the route and the public hearing was posted on March 4th. Public hearing notices were placed on all Route 110 stops, posted in San Diego Daily Transcript and on the MTS website. MTS received 7 comments regarding the discontinuation of the route. 2 were in favor and 5 were against the change at the close of business yesterday. And then I'll pass it over to Brent for the recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So that concludes the presentation. Again, we think we've identified opportunity to save a significant amount of money without impacting transit passengers and actually improve service for a significant number of passengers on that route. So that brings us to the recommendation that the San Diego MTS Board of Directors receive public testimony and approve the discontinuation of 110. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, then we will close the public hearing. We will open it up to board discussion, and we will begin with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Could I be so hopeful that you know who those 40 people are because they tap their Pronto Pass when they get on, so you know who's on the bus? And could I be that hopeful?
We don't track it. We don't know the individual person. We can see by card where they're traveling to when they tap the card.
But you don't have the ability to say, I tap the card, so you can send me a message saying you're at risk of this being discontinued?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
You could, but not everybody registers their card.
Okay.
So if we don't have their phone number or address, we wouldn't be able to send it. That's why we posted notices at the bus stops, and we had actual planners out there talking to customers.
Yeah, so the notices were at the bus stops for the last several weeks, and the survey was up there before. And then we went out on the February 24th. Chris was up at Miramar College. I was downtown and talked to everybody on the bus, and basically everybody had seen the survey and the notifications.
Is the drop from the pandemic due to more people getting remote work?
I think for these types of the express routes, there's a whole combination of things from the pandemic. There's the remote work, there's the lessening of demand for downtown travel. And those are probably the key components, or the work from home and the lessening of importance of downtown. And we're seeing that not just in San Diego, and that's happening all over the country, the kind of the declining importance of the central business districts in commute patterns.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Hall.
This is one of those hard decisions we have to make. And therefore I'm going to make the motion to staff recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Director Hall. We'll go to Director Fleming.
And I will second that motion that we approve the staff recommendation on discontinuation of Route 110.
Thank you. We have a motion from Director Hall and a second from Director Fleming to approve the staff recommendation. Seeing no further discussion, clerk, please take the roll.
Members, if you can please make the selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 13 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
All right, thank you very much. It looks like we do have time to at least do some of item 20, which is an informational update on the fare change study. Mark Olson and Israel Maldonado will provide the presentation.
Well, thank you, Chair and members of the board. Appreciate this opportunity. Again, Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications for MTS, and joining me today is Israel Maldonado. He's the Director of Fare Technology and Operations. So the fare change study is part of a broader financial sustainability strategy to extend the fiscal cliff for MTS beyond its current location of 2028. And as part of this strategy, MTS board voted in last year to work with SANDAG and NCTD to look at a fare change study as a possible partial solution for this issue we're going through. So boiling it down, strategy for filling the gap, we're looking to extend this fiscal cliff out a couple more years. What we need to do is find about $528 million to get there. And so we're looking at a number of different strategies, as you can see in this pie chart here. We're looking at moving some non-essential capital funding over to operations. We're using some of our reserves to backfill our budget over the next 4 years. We have miscellaneous operating expenses which were talked about earlier, with hiring freezes or position freezes, building up non-fare revenue, things like that. And then that fourth piece to the pie here is fares and service. And that's what we're going to be focusing on here today, because in the transit industry, there's two main levers that we have control of when it comes to funding, and that's through service levels and the cost to ride. And what we're looking here at this $93 million, if you look at that year to year, what we're looking to do is find for this piece of the pie, find $23 million over the next 4 years between the cost to ride versus service levels. So just in order of magnitude here, what does $23 million a year mean? Well, it represents about 26% of the current fare revenues that we generate from our riders. If you compare this to service levels, you can see it's all Saturday bus and trolley service, that's about $18 million. All weekend bus service, that's $24 million a year that it costs us to operate that. All Blue Line service 7 days a week, that's $22.3 million. All Green Line and Orange Line service 7 days a week, that costs $23.5 million. So as part of this effort, we did a phase 1 of outreach in the fall, and we had 5,700 responses to a survey that we put out to our riders and the general public. The high level takeaways from that survey was that our riders and the public prioritize service levels over the cost to ride. Another thing was they wanted to see some kind of preservation of youth and senior price passes as much as possible, even if other payment categories have to pay a little bit more. Look at considering a phased approach to any increases that we may have to fares. And they did favor increases to the one-way passes and day passes over the monthly pass price. And now I'll hand it over to Israel to go through the next few slides.
Good morning. Over the course of several months, SANDAG staff, MTS, and NCTD collaborated in developing fare packages aimed at increasing revenue, with the goal of targeting that 50% of the budgetary gap that Mark just mentioned, while also considering ridership losses, price sensitivity for SDM riders, rider willingness to pay a little more to keep service levels as high as possible, with the goal of helping to push the fiscal cliff out to 2030. But how do our prices compare? So here we see 6 different peer agencies. Our MTS adult one-way fare is $2.50. Our adult day pass, our daily cap is $6, which is more or less in line with the rest of our peers. Where we're not in line with our peers is when it comes to our adult monthly pass, which is $72, and the rest of our peers are head and shoulders above that pricing. And now the fare package proposals. Package A, we're looking at a 50% 50-cent increase on the adult one-way fare from $2.50 to $3, an increase on the SDM one-way fare by 25 cents from $1.25 to $1.50, an increase on the adult day pass from $6 to $7, an increase on the SDM day pass from $3 to $3.50, and an increase on the adult monthly pass, the adult monthly cap from $72 to $90 for adults. For SDM, we're looking at an increase of $23 to $30. Package B has a higher proposal on hand, moving the $2.50 adult one-way fare to $3.50, increasing the SDM one-way at the same rate as package A to $1.50 from $1.25. The adult day pass would rise from $6 to $8. The SDM day pass would increase from $3 to $3.50, same as package A. Here is a significant change. The adult monthly pass is proposed for package B to rise from $72 to $100, and the SDM monthly pass from $23 to $28. Important to call out here in these packages that the daily and monthly caps would apply here. What are they? They're part of our fare capping best fare structure that is currently built into the system. So what this does is facilitates the value experience for our customer, meaning a customer does not have to immediately pay for the adult monthly pass upfront. They can add value to their account piecemeal throughout the month, $5 here, $10 there, $20 there. And as they tap and use their value, the system credits them on the daily cap and cumulative into the monthly cap. So it ensures that they do not overpay and they can still enjoy the benefit of the monthly pass discount. And now some of the impacts of package A. It is estimated to increase revenue annually by 11.2 million, with a projected annual ridership loss of 2.3 million. At a high level comparison between packages A and B, package A has a lower adult but higher SDM monthly pass price, has a lower day pass and one-way fares, lower revenue impact and more service impacts. Overall, lower ridership loss. Package B has an estimated annual revenue increase of 16.8 million, a higher projected annual ridership loss of 3.2 million. Overall comparison with package A, package B has the higher adult but lower SDM monthly pass price, has a greater increase on the adult day pass and one-way fares. It would produce higher revenue, which would help lessen service impacts, but it does come at a higher ridership loss.
Okay, now that we developed these two packages, our next thing we had to do was go out to the public and see what they think. I think we wanted to first get some reactions to the packages. We wanted to see if people were going to, just totally walk out of the room on us and say this is, not acceptable. We wanted to identify the tolerance levels for increases, understand some of the sensitivities to pricing, and then ultimately what we want to do is help inform a final package to bring back to the board for consideration at its next meeting in April. So we asked a series of questions. We wanted to bring back that question about cost versus service, which package people would want to choose if they had to choose one, a scaled package B to see if that was possible and see what people think about that. And then also to Israel's point about fare capping, if we were able to eliminate that to keep the monthly pass price maybe below $90, is that something that they would support? And so we did that in 3 different ways. We had some workshops that were in person. We had over 80 participants at 5 workshops. We also did an online version of this, 800 respondents there. And then we also went out to our transit centers to talk to our riders. And between those three different ways we were communicating with people, the results were very similar. Certainly the cost to ride versus service levels, people definitely preferred a higher fare to maintain bus and trolley services as much as possible. With the package preference, it was about split equally between, package A and package B. I think people, going back to that cost versus service levels, that was one of the things where people probably supported a higher monthly pass in that package B because it would limit the reduction of service levels. But certainly these were fairly even between the two groups of infrequent riders and those frequent riders. And then a phased approach, there was definitely support for that. I think when you look at the yellow bar and the blue bar and combine those, we're in the 70 to 80% range. If we are able to go with a phased approach for that package B, people would definitely prefer to have that package. And then with fare capping, there wasn't much support for fare capping or for eliminating fare capping, that is, among most of the categories that we found up until you get to people who ride 6 to 7 days a week. But for the most part, people wanted to keep fare capping in place. So the high level results, people still favor keeping service levels as much as possible, even if they have to pay more after seeing these packages. It was split evenly between A and B. Our senior riders were definitely in favor of package B, a little bit more just due to the smaller increase in SDM fares. A phased approach for package B was more tolerable, and there wasn't overwhelming support to eliminate fare capping, even if we were able to get that monthly pass price a little bit lower than $90. So our plan is to come back to the board in April with potential fare increase recommendations, just due to the overwhelming support that people have for paying a little bit more to keep service levels as high as possible. NCTD is doing their outreach efforts right now and should have that wrapped up at the end of the month. So we should have a final report with all of these outreach efforts that we've been doing ready for you when this does come back before the board, so you can see that all in one place and finalized. If the board does decide to move forward with any kind of fare changes, we anticipate that would take place probably in the fall, because we'll need a couple 6 weeks to 2 months just to educate our riders about any changes that are taking place. So with that, we can answer any questions you have. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do not have any public comments, Chair.
Okay, we will open board discussion on this item. This is an informational item, so no motion is necessary. We'll begin our discussion with Director Moreno.
Thank you for the presentation. Community engagement is an umbrella term that includes so many different methods and approaches. For instance, in District 8, community engagement often has a human component. There's often a need to tackle misinformation and also mistrust. So community engagement in District 8 requires planning ahead for issues with the digital divide. In phase 2 of outreach, I do appreciate seeing events at transit centers like Iris, as well as engaging key partners like Casa Familiar. But I would encourage and put on the record for MTS to make concerted efforts to reach riders in person in District 8, especially along the blue line, to capture their insight as much as possible. Early commuters take advantage of the blue line in San Isidro, for instance, and we also have the 910 route as well. And they could potentially have a lot to say about fare changes or not, right? But we want to give them that benefit. Riders in District 8 are a high-touch community that benefit from in-person interaction whenever possible. Once again, to bridge the digital divide. The blue line, which is, I think, I would say one of our most important lines, is a good source to understand ridership, and going directly to where people are is an important need. Additionally, in addition to Casa Familiar, there are other well-connected organizations in San Isidro that serve as trusted messengers who we could potentially engage. The San Isidro Health Center, Años Dorados, and most recently the San Isidro BID. So I look forward to hearing MTS get in touch with some of those groups and also do in-person surveys, maybe at, peak hours in the morning, in the evening. But I do thank you for this informational item, and I look forward to the updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Seeing no further discussion on this item, we have two closed session items this morning, a conference with legal counsel on anticipated litigation and a conference with legal counsel on existing litigation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session items?
We do not.
Okay, before we move into closed session, let's take board member or CEO communications, and we're going to begin with Director Leyva Gonzalez, who has departed. All right, we will not do that then. Any further CEO or board member communication? Seeing none, the board's next meeting date is on March 19th at 9 o'clock in the morning, and we will now move into closed session.
Reporting out of closed session, agenda item number 22, closed session conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D2 for the claim of Nicholas Sudi. The board received a report and gave instructions to legal counsel. For agenda item number 23, closed session conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D1, the Edmondson versus MTS case. The board received a report and gave instructions to legal counsel.
The meeting has adjourned at 11:58 a.m.